Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Project Flux podcast. And today we have a spotlight with Yash Desai. He is the innovation lead at Mova. Yash, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Yoshi. Again, a pleasure to be on the podcast. I've heard and read a lot about the podcast, but yeah, it's a pleasure to be on this today.
Fantastic. And Yoshi, how are you? All good on your end?
I'm good, mate. I'm looking forward to this one because it's more of a techie, a deep dive, but I feel like we can take this opportunity to kind of translate to people some of the inner workings of what we're talking about day in, day out.
Yeah, exactly. So we did have a discussion pre-recording that we want to make sure we don't go too deep for some of you listeners, but at the same time, we think you can all handle a little bit of tech. And the conversations that Yash and I have had at various conferences do tend to get quite deep. So apologies in advance. You might need to engage brain on this one a little bit, but we'll try and make it as digestible as possible. Now, Yash, we bump into each other at all kinds of conferences. The last one was at the House of PMO, where we ended up having lunch together,
Yeah.
and we were both getting quite excited about all the latest models and what we were doing. You know what you're probably the one person apart from Yoshi that probably gets as excited about this stuff as we do. So why are you so passionate and excited about AI and everything? Because it's infectious. When I talk to you, I feel even more excited than I normally do about it, because you bring it all to life often with the stuff that you're doing at Mova.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I can just start from the very basics. So my sort of natural instinct is that I love to build things. So
Mm.
since childhood, I've been always, like that naughty kid who's, a lot into technology and likes to build things. So I
Mm.
started off with HTML coding and like to build websites back then. Then I sort of shifted into microcontrollers, trying to do some sort of automations, turning on and off the lights of the room, changing the colors and all those sorts of things. And I think it's that core where I just love to build things, and looking at what we have in the market now and what's the art of the possible using some of the AI tools out there. It's quite sort of fascinating that what we can do with
Yeah,
AI.
it's humbling in a way, isn't it? Because all these things that I was talking to somebody this week around, I'm older than you, but I remember back in the 80s and the 90s when all this sci-fi was coming out. And the reason there was so much sci-fi and such a wealth of incredible fiction in that time was because there was a gap between our imaginations and what was technically possible. But I feel like now the technology is catching up with our imaginations, and all these things that we dreamt about or read about or watched in films are coming true. Do you feel the same, or do you feel I'm being over enthusiastic about that kind of possibility?
I think a lot of things have been, so a lot of movies that we saw, like, years ago, so many of those things are actually coming to life, I feel. And I think it's just going to be better over the time with
Do you know?
increasing sort of adoption of technology.
Do you know what I find really strange is I watched Blade Runner,
Mm.
the recent one a couple of years back now, when it first came out, and I couldn't really work out all the new technologies, with the drones flying about and making sense of the world.
Yeah.
And there was his electronic girlfriend, his computational girlfriend, all these different things. And back then I was like, oh god, I can't see this happening. I rewatched it a few days ago, and you can start to connect the dots with the technology, and you can really see it how it will play out. And like you say, James, that the bridging that gap, it feels so much closer now, and it was quite surreal watching it back and being like, wow, I could see this next year, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think the other one is Black Mirror. Have you guys seen Black Mirror?
yeah. I love
Yeah.
Black Mirror. Love it. The weird thing about Black Mirror is, because obviously it's still running, but if you go back and watch like the first season, the first few seasons, I remember because it wasn't that long ago, right? This isn't like an 80s film
Mm.
that you. This is like just when was the first series? Maybe 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
But some of those things that were represented in that first series have come true, and you're thinking, well, okay, so now you watch the latest series and you look at it in a different paradigm now, because now
Mhm.
you know that what happened 7 series ago has come true in 7 years. So therefore you're looking at this stuff saying, okay, they've proved that this really is moving that fast, so where are we going? Particularly the stuff about there was one of the episodes around the social scores of the uh, and you're living and you're working to increase your social
Yeah.
scores. And of course, that's true in parts of China now. They actually do that. They measure you and your social scores. So it is fascinating. But trying to translate it and go back sort of project delivery as well. I think it's really, really interesting because whilst it can be a little bit mundane sometimes, like the world of project delivery, actually it's a really important part of the economy. And what we're trying to do here is change and transform an industry that has been plagued with inefficiencies and productivity problems for decades. And I know the stuff that you've done, Yash. You know, Mova won one of the awards at the last
Yeah,
awards. Was it the I can't
Global
remember which
Innovation
award it
Award,
was. The
Project
Global
Flux.
Innovation Awards. So some of the stuff that you're doing is really pushing the boundaries. Can you just talk to that for a minute about some of the stuff that you're doing in your role at Mova?
So again, I have to wear multiple hats at Mova. I started off as a data analyst and leaning into leading the data team. And then now
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm more around innovation. So I kind of touch points on the internal systems as well, internal business systems, also looking at the client side of things. But again, around the digital PMO that we implemented at Seven Trend, again, it's kind of correlates to the talk that I had recently at House of PMO. Get
Yeah.
your basics right first, sort your data strategy in the first place, make sure you store your data correctly in a sort of structured way, and then kind of have an integrated source of truth is what we say, as there's not going to be a single source of truth anywhere. Everyone would have their own sort of versions of working on things, but it should all come into one place and it should be integrated in a way where you can get the best value out of it. So again,
Mm-hmm.
when you look at this from a digital PMO perspective, you have your risks on one side, you have your project plans coming in from systems like Microsoft Projects or Primavera P6, and again, on-site information from site pictures and all those sorts of things. How do you make sure you bring all of this together and all of that data tells you the same story, right?
Yeah. But it's not easy, is it? I think that's the big challenge we have in the industry because there are so many disparate sources of information. Bringing it all together is like you can improve it, of course, but I think it's really difficult to get everything together. So my question is, how important is it still as important as ever to have that single source of the truth and the kind of structured data? Or do you think with some of the latest models, particularly some of these reasoning models, it can work with some messier data?
I think to an extent it can work with messier data, but again, when it comes to traceability, when you actually want to trace the information back to its source and just that trust over the fact that is this information actually true, that's where orchestration and that's where things like structured databases would come into the picture.
Okay, interesting. So you still need it there, even if it's giving you the right answer. You want to be able to
Yeah.
chase it back. That's interesting, actually, because when I use deep research and things like that within some of the models, you do it. That's the beauty of something like deep research is you can click the links and look at the sources. Whereas in other uses, you're never quite sure where the model's got the information from. So I think that's quite an interesting point. Okay, so can I ask another question around the future and what's like one moment in your career, and that could be either your professional or personal when you've been playing with stuff, one
Yeah.
moment where it really felt like you were stepping into the future.
I think it's an interesting question, this one, and it goes back when I was sort of transitioning from my electronics experience. So I am, by the way, an electronics engineer as well,
Okay.
for the audience, and I worked a lot with microcontrollers, as I mentioned previously, and I was heading up a team for a project competition called Intelligent Ground Vehicle Competition, and this is
Hmm.
around doing things like creating a self-driving bot, and there's lots of
Okay.
moving parts to something like this. Again, super technical. I'll try to keep it not so technical. So there's a camera at the top which will sort of run the algorithm for making sure that the vehicle is maneuvering correctly. So at what degree do you turn, detecting the obstacles in between. And there's a piece around electronics. I was working on as the head of the electronics team there, and that's when I actually kind of worked a lot with my machine learning head as well. And that's
Mm.
when I saw the real power of AI. Tried to understand the algorithm of how it works in the first place, what is the power of AI, what it can do in the future, and all those sorts of things. And since then, again, I had a transition from using C++ as my primary programming language to Python. I learned
Mm.
Python, then I had to, I had a few projects I worked on. I published 3 research papers on a lot of systems around AI and embedded systems. But
And
since then,
what year was this? What sort of time frame was this?
I think this was 2018, I would say, about
Okay.
7-ish years ago in my university.
Okay. And where was that? What
Mumbai.
university did you study at?
It
Mumbai,
was
right.
NMIMS University in Mumbai.
Okay. And that, of course, 2018 was around the time the Transformer paper from Google came out. So that was
Yeah.
the big switch. And I feel like it's really amazing that it's captured the world's imagination now that we've got these generative AI systems. But it kind of feels like people forget about the analytical AI, like the machine learning, and that's still really important, particularly in project delivery, right?
Yeah, definitely. There's lots of things around machine learning as well, but there's also one thing to keep in mind, that the foundational models, by foundational models I mean GPT and Claude and all of these models, they're referred to as foundation models, and these models are getting so much better over the time that some of these tasks around, for instance, classifying an email as a spam or a ham, you would have to train a separate sort of classification model for this previously, and now I think an LLM generalizes so well that it can take care of something like this. Sentiment analysis and all the tasks like related to a language processing, all of these tasks are kind of taken care by these foundation models. And
That's interesting.
on this thing, I'd actually recommend a book called AI Engineering by Chip Huon, and it talks a lot about how you build applications using AI and specifically foundation models. So again, it's not something which is super technical. It's not like around code and all those sorts of things. It's more around the business value of AI. It's technical enough for you to be interested enough to read that. And again, it's a huge book. So if you're not too much into reading books, one of the things I do is I use Notebook LM, and I'm sure you guys have used Notebook LM as well.
We love it. We love it.
Yeah, and I just plug this book into Notebook LM, and for specific parts, I just like generate a 30-40 minute podcast, and I just listen to
That's
that.
what I'm doing. I've got an amazing, it's like I've hacked my life. So what I do now when I want to study something, I go to deep research. So I wanted to understand MCPs the other day. For people who don't know, it's the new kind of interface to make agents talk to different pieces of data and software. I never quite got it. I didn't quite, I knew it was good. I didn't quite get it. So I did a deep research using ChatGPT, and then I fed that into a Notebook LM, and then it talked to me for 30 minutes, and now I get it. That's such a cool hack, I think, and I'm doing it for everything now.
So here's the thing with MCPs, right? So again, we've used a lot of MCPs. I use MCPs for GitHub. I've used an MCP for LinkedIn as well.
But before we go into that, can you explain, because I don't think I do a very good job of it, can you explain to the listeners in the most basic way possible what an MCP is?
Of course, of course. So MCP is Model Context Protocol, and this protocol was introduced by a company called Anthropic, which is again one of the other sort of LLM giants equivalent to OpenAI. And this protocol allows large language model like GPT or Claude to talk to tools out there, right? So again, if you just take an LLM in isolation, it's just giving you instructions to do things. But when you give it power of tools, it can actually do that for you in real life. So that's exactly what MCP does. It allows
Can
an
you give us an example? Can you give us an example of how that would work?
So from a technical perspective, so I write a lot of code, and for there's tools like GitHub where you have to maintain your code and maintain the versions of your code. So one of the things I use MCP quite a lot is I use Cursor as an IDE for my sort of programming, and I have GitHub MCP. So all of the admin work around coding, so setting up a repository, documentation of my repository, and pushing it, committing it, and all those sorts of things, it's all automated using the GitHub MCP. I still remember I've written a few blogs in the past around how do you set up your GitHub repository and all those sorts of things, and it's all like not so relevant at the moment because it's just like automated
Interesting.
so much at this day and age.
Wow. Yash, you mentioned that you started to see the power of AI, and then you had a transition period where you started to learn Python and started to leverage it. And it took you not too much, quite a smart guy. I'll give you your credit. But for some people, especially when you hear Sam Altman talking nowadays, he says that anyone can start to use AI. They can start to build products with AI. And like you mentioned, you just referred to us to a book where you can build applications with AI. How difficult is that learning curve now? And if the average Joe can pick up and leverage these large language models to start to build AI or software or other things themselves, how sophisticated can those builds be to the point where you have to start to learn the fundamentals?
So again, comparing it with how it was done pre sort of LLM era, right? So pre LLM era, when I would build an application or I would build something, it would be me going through GitHub issues and Kaggle comments and Stack Overflow mainly to find out pieces of code that I can reuse or some of the issues, some of the errors that I face in coding. Now I think all of this is a lot better in terms of automation. Like you can build up a POC, a proof of concept, quite quickly. There's tools like Bolt and Lovable and Replit and all of these tools, and these are great for building POCs. Like you can do a POC within an hour, which probably would have taken you about a week to build. But again, keeping things in there, there's a few things, there's a few good features with these sort of tools. You can click deploy and it will just like publish your application, which would have taken dockerizing it and publishing it, getting a hosting platform and all those sorts of things. So it frees you up from all of these hassle. But at the same time, you need to take into consideration a lot of things when you build a productionized application. So when it comes to building an application where there's 10,000 customers, there's so much that you have to keep in mind. There's authentication, there's security,
The
so all of
security is
these
a big one.
things. And again, I don't think these tools like Bolt and Lovable are there yet. Again, it might improve with the more sophistication of the large language models and how they sort of improve. But at the moment, I don't think they can do a lot in terms of creating production grade applications. Cursor at the same time has the capability, but it would take someone who has more experience and more knowledge in sort of building applications to actually make the best out of it.
So would you recommend? Well, would you recommend that people learn to code Python with the trajectory of development at the moment and how fast we're moving? I mean, if you were to zoom back to pre 2022 or 2023, you wouldn't believe the things that we could achieve now. Like we wouldn't have been able to predict what we could do today.
Yeah.
So my question is, if you then look in the same distance, 2-3 years from now,
Yeah.
should me and James learn how to code, or do you think it will become a point where software engineers, for people like us, who work on the edge, don't need to actually be able to need to code? We need to focus more on the metacognitive aspects of our work and communication, emotional intelligence, and strategic thinking, and these sort of things.
So the short answer is I would not recommend you to learn how to code from scratch. Is the short answer. The reason
Okay.
being that you have your own sort of skill sets and your own workflows, and obviously that's the core of your skills, right? Uh, be comfortable enough to use some of these tools out there so you can make the best out of it. You won't be building production grade applications yourself, right? You would have software engineers who are already a step ahead in terms of understanding all of this, and when they use AI, they make the best use of it in terms of creating applications and writing code. So you let software engineers do their job, but from our perspective, from a personal perspective, I think we should be at least using things like Bolt, which are quite sort of easy to use and don't require you to know how to code, for things like proof of concept. So if you are trying to explain something to your software development team, then you can sort of by yourself, with your ideas and your sort of thoughts, create something. It's basically turning your thoughts and logic into an application, right?
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're definitely going to talk a bit more about this concept of what's now being called vibe coding, but sticking to what you've just said. So this is what I've been preaching, and I wonder what your thoughts are on this. I've been saying to like your average project manager or quantity surveyor or structural engineer or whoever is working in the project delivery space, the future is not necessarily knowing how to code, but it's about knowing the principles enough that you can stack these tools together. And I think that is going to be a skill that is going to differentiate a successful project delivery person from somebody who's going to be impacted by the upcoming AI revolution. Am I saying the right thing there? Do you agree? And please feel free to disagree, because it's just my gut instinct that that's what I think is going to be an important skill for people going forward.
I do agree with you, James. Definitely, 100%. I agree that just getting used to these sort of basic AI systems is going to be necessary for everyone out there, each and every working professional out there. But
Mm.
again, keeping in mind that staying, again, improving their core skills and not going crazy over the side of code, because it can be distracting at times, right? Innovation is happening on the other side in terms of LLMs and code and agents and all those sorts of things. But if you stick to your skills and try to improve your own core skills by using these tools and all these sort of models out there, that's where the real value is, I guess.
Yeah. And it's a hard thing for people to get to grips with, because if you've been doing something in a certain way, let's say for 20 years, let's say there's a project manager listening to this now and they've done something a certain way for 20 years, they got their workflows in place. And you're basically saying, right, you need to change the way that you do things. Try using these tools. So what I would suggest to people is don't do it all at once. Just choose one tool and change one workflow. It's like habits, build that habit of using maybe ChatGPT just to help you strategically think about what you're doing. doing. And then, you can move on to another tool. There's the automation tools, things like N8N, and then maybe then stack on some of the agents like Manus or Operator. And that's what I'm trying to say to people. Don't get overwhelmed by it. Just, just get that 1% a day improvement. Learn a new tool every week or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So there's just one sort of very easy workflow. So if you guys don't know about Claude, Claude is again a model from Anthropic,
Yes,
and
I
there's a
love Claude.
desktop application for Claude, and now they've got some connectors. Obviously, it supports MCPs, and you can configure MCPs there, but they have some off-the-shelf connectors. So one of the
Yeah, I've seen
connectors
that.
is a Gmail connector, and what I use that for is I have a lot of sort of newsletters for different publications from AI, and I don't have the time to read them all. So what I just do is I connect my Gmail account, the one where I have subscribed the newsletters from, and I just ask it to summarize all of those newsletters
Oh
in
man,
3 or 4
you won't
lines.
believe this. I built in N a sequence that does that for us for the newsletter that we write, so we understand it. So I'm going to need to find out what you've done, because that's
Yeah,
brand new, isn't it? The connectors that they released, Claude.
I think it's about like not more than a month since they
Yeah,
released that. But I have a complaint for Claude. Like the application has been down quite a lot for the last 1 or 2 months. I think since
yeah,
they've released the newer models, the Claude 4, Sonnet and Opus, the desktop application, at least on my Mac, has been down for quite a lot of time.
yeah.
Yeah,
I've heard
there's a
that.
lot. There's a lot because the servers get quite busy. I saw an MCP recently called Super Memory AI or something like that, and that
Mhm.
connects it to your Apple, so you can send messages and you can start to work a lot within your Apple environment, which is pretty
Yeah,
cool.
it's amazing.
I also heard that there's this new Claude Code now. Are you using that rather than Cursor? We've got a few people shifting over from using Cursor to using VS Code with Claude Code.
So I did that. I did that shift. I think it was about 1.5, 2 months ago when I did that shift. So I was use almost all of these tools. I use Windsurf, I use Cursor
Yeah.
to test all of these things because again it's a part of my job, but at the same time I like using it and I like testing these tools. One of the things I did was I sort of connected my Claude desktop with GitHub
Hmm.
with Netlify, which is again the sort of choice of deploying applications from all of these vibe coding tools like Bolt and Replit and Lovable. They all deploy their applications on this hosting platform called Netlify, and
Hmm.
there's an MCP for that as well. So
Okay.
why should I use Bolt if its real value is one click deploy? I can do that using Claude Code plus a
Yeah.
Netlify MCP.
Yeah.
And on Bolt, you have connections on GitHub, Netlify, and Superbase, which is the database of choice.
Yeah.
And all three of these have MCPs that configure with Claude Code on the desktop.
So you
So
don't need these tools. You can do it directly through Claude now, effectively.
you can, but there's one catch though. There's token limits on Claude which won't allow you to use it at the full potential. So oftentimes I just run out of the tokens on Claude. On the
But
same time
Yash,
on Bolt,
what's your state of the art kit that you use now? Your AI kit.
I use a combination of a few things. Okay, so I use ChatGPT's deep research first of all.
Yeah.
When I'm building something new, when I'm building a new application or something, I always make sure that I start with a development plan. I don't just start with Cursor. And by the way, Cursor is my preferred choice of IDE for now. I say for now because it keeps changing a lot.
Yeah.
I start with deep research on depends like where I get an idea. So if it's just like I'm sitting at home, I would just open up voice chat on chat GPT and I would just ask questions around this is an idea that I have and I'm trying to build something like this X Y and Z, and please write me a detailed low level design documentation for my senior software developer or my software developing lead so that I can get this application built,
Mm.
and it just gives me all the details on whatever I want. And again, I know for a fact that a few sort of things that I use. So I use a few databases. For instance, if I'm using MongoDB, I would just mention that I want MongoDB, I want a Java script and React front end, and
That's the
a few other,
context. You're giving it
yeah,
the context.
context. And it just gives me a very detailed sort of documentation. I would just skim the documentation once and just make sure that everything is in place. Then I take that documentation, take that sort of entire context, and paste that in the Cursor's notepad file. So in Cursor, you
Yeah.
have a notepad file probably, and there's also Cursor rules. So I just paste
For
it
the,
there.
for the, for those who don't know, Cursor is basically a code editor that is AI powered. Just giving
Yeah,
people some.
yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. And again, I take that information, put that in the notepad, and cursor for every sort of API call and every chat message that I send has the context of the entire notepad file. So it keeps in mind that this is the development plan. So any sort of new features it adds, it keeps in mind that it doesn't have to go in a different direction. Because usually what happens is if you compare a software developer using all of these platforms for vibe coding and a non-developer for vibe coding, the non-developer would most likely go in a wrong direction after the first few. So again, these models are becoming better. So the first 2 or 3 iterations, you might get what you want. Something that looks good is a POC. But when you start adding features, that's when the real sort of knowledge of the software developer kicks in. Because that's when a non-developer would start going in a different direction, and you would end up wasting so many tokens. There's an option to retry on Bolt, so you just keep pressing on retry and fixing things, and it would just like take up
You're
all your.
so right. I've wasted. I use Lovable, and I've definitely
Yeah.
got myself into the point where the first iteration is really good, and then you want to do something, and it goes into this kind of, it gets confused, and it goes into this like vicious circle, and you have to start it again. You have to start a new instance up, and I think actually learning to code, as Yoshi and I are doing at the moment, is actually helping, because you can actually see what's going on there, and you can have a conversation. But it's interesting what you're doing there. Always, it's very similar to the way that you should use these large language models properly, by always making sure the context is front and center. But it's
Well,
exactly
that's
the
the
same
game.
with coding.
But that's it. It's the context. So the more sophisticated your build, or the more bloated or how big it is, if your AI is running out of, if the context window is small, you'll get to a certain point where it will struggle to read your code base, right, and work with it. So this is the issue that I'm getting at, is at what point do you struggle to rely on the AI because it can't manage all the context?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because there's newer models out there. Have you seen Gemini 2.5 Pro?
Yeah, so
Yeah, that's that's
Gemini is
good.
one with the biggest context window, right? That's the one
Yeah,
because I was going to buy the Google Ultra AI plan, right?
yeah.
They've just changed it again, haven't they? It's now called AI Pro.
Something like
I can't
this.
keep up with these plans.
I was going to buy it because of the context window, and that was the one thing, as well as the Notebook LM Advanced video feature potentially coming out, were the two things that I'm really interested in, and VO and a few other things. But that's the thing; it's the context.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It's the context. Yeah.
But I think again, you can be a bit smarter with that sometimes. So if you think that you're losing a lot of context in sort of subsequent prompts, then just try and do this. If you run out of context, just copy your entire conversation, put that through Chat GPT's deep research or something like that, or any other model that has a good enough context window, and just ask it to summarize it in a sizable format that captures
Yes.
all the context, and then copy and paste that again so that it continues
Yeah,
in a new conversation. So it kind of
That's a
has context.
brilliant idea.
yeah. So it's that level of extraction. It's a
Yeah.
good thing, but you make sure you
Because
keep.
you were doing the emoji thing, weren't you, Yoshi? Do you want to
I
tell the
was doing the
listeners what
emoji
that
thing.
is?
Yeah, so the emoji thing was basically I'd always ask the AI to start with the random emoji, and then eventually I'd know if it starts to forget the emoji at the start of its reply, I know that it's lost some context.
Right. Yeah,
He's
that's
not.
it.
He's not impressed. He's not impressed, Yoshi. He's thinking that's a waste of time. I like your.
Maybe
I
about
like
that.
Yash's idea a lot better. But let's move on to vibe coding, because we've touched on it a little bit, and I want to spend a little bit of time on it because I think it's such a massive thing. So can we just start with what is vibe coding? Yes, just in the super basic explanation for people. What do we mean when we say vibe coding?
So I think by vibe coding, my understanding of vibe coding is basically if you have sort of no clue about programming at all, and you are able to create an application, deploy that application just by a few prompts, and that basically is vibe coding. And AI
Mhm.
is automatically writing code for you just using basic instructions and without having to worry about the individual details around things. So for instance, you can actually in this day and age write a 3-line prompt and the AI can build and publish an app for you. So that is like how it summarized vibe coding.
And it's really hard to explain it. And what I would encourage all the listeners to do is go on to Replit, Bolt.new, or Lovable. Those are the three that really work. I think there's a free plan for most of them, and just try it. Because I spoke to somebody yesterday, they came up with an interesting comment. They said that the most popular programming language in the future is going to be English, because you it's getting better all the time, and you can basically just talk to it as if you can talk to ChatGPT. And it's early days, you're right, it does have these problems where it goes in these loops and it blows up every now and again, but to understand where this is going, you've got to see where we are now and then give it a year or so. But I think that there's an important point you raised before, which is the use case for these vibe coding platforms isn't necessarily to deploy something, but it's to get something out of your mind. So whereas in the past, if you had an idea for an app, say, you'd have to write it down, you'd have to sink a lot of time and a lot of money to get a proof of concept done, and then that might fail. What you can do now is, if you've got an idea, in an hour or so you can actually produce a working proof of concept, and that's what I think is the use for. So you're not trying to explain to people what's in your mind, you can actually show them.
Exactly. So you can step in a room with a working sort of interactive proof of concept instead of a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, exactly. So that's and then, I'm certainly not suggesting you can deploy that. But what you can do, actually, this is a question for you. If let's say I've developed a bit of vibe coding in an evening, and I got this idea, and it pretty much works apart from a few bits and pieces, like it's a really simple app, and I is there a way you can then give that code to someone like yourself, someone who's a coder, who can then get that production ready? Or do you then have to start from scratch if you want to make it production ready?
That's an interesting question, James. It really depends how far you've taken the POC, and again how good the platform is in the first place. So if you've built something using, again, I would say a cursor. So for instance, Bolt and some of these platforms, you can't choose the models there, right? So you don't really know
Yeah.
which model has written the code. For tools like Cursor and Windsurf, which are again called vibe coding tools, but at the same time you have more control over the details. So you can again choose the model. So you can choose, for instance, a Claude Sonnet 4, which I kind of trust at the moment in terms of writing code for me. And I've tested it with a lot of converting of my logic into code. So if you start with these sort of tools, then again, I think it's better to sort of, I'd probably have a better trust on the code and I can give it to someone else. But again, I would actually create the documentation if I'm giving it to a software developer, keeping in
Yeah.
mind the software developer would also have access to these tools. So it
Yes.
might be easier for them to just take in the logic and sort of orchestrate it in a way which is, again, they would be able to create the same thing that you did in an hour, right? So it's again, I'd let them do that part, but it's good to sort of demonstrate your
Yes.
features
Yeah. Okay,
using
that
using
makes
these vibe
sense.
coding platforms.
So just on that, do you class Cursor as vibe coding then?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
vibe coding as
Interesting.
well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yash, you've mentioned a few things, and you've kind of spoken to how far AI has come, right? Mentioning that we can write a 3-line prompt and it can build you an app and deploy it, right? I think that shows us how quickly we've progressed in the field of AI. And there's a lot of discourse around AGI. When
Yeah.
are we going to reach AGI?
Yeah.
What does it look like? I did see Eric Schmidt recently talk about AGI to this point where he says that with humans, we innovate at the cutting edge where people can recognize patterns in one field and then extrapolate that to other fields and find, similarity in those patterns and innovate. And that to me was kind of a nice idea in terms of what AGI might look like. But my question to you is what do you think AGI looks like, and when do you think we'll reach it? If you think we will reach it.
I think we would. It's still far away. I would say, it's still a few years away because again, what exactly is AGI? So if I were to define AGI, it's basically if an AI system has got median human intelligence and creativity and can sort of, so for instance, if I have a workflow and I just want a human in the loop, can I trust an AGI, for doing any job, like any job, any industry, any job, and can it replace that specific human that's in the loop in that specific workflow? Not at the
But
moment.
it's interesting because the definition keeps changing. So when I use Manus, sometimes it feels a bit AGI.
Yeah.
Like for in certain tasks, I'm like, okay, this is probably better than some humans would do it. But if you went back to 2017 at your university and someone sat you down and showed you what we've got now, would you at that point class that as AGI? Because I've got a feeling that we're changing our definition of AGI and keep pushing it back, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I think there's lots of different definitions of AGI. People kind of change the language quite a lot.
They
But
do.
yeah, again, for me, I think even if you take large language models, so if you know the chief scientist at Meta, I
Yeah.
think his name Yan Lee.
Yan
Yeah.
Kun,
Yeah,
yeah.
he mentioned that scaling LLMs won't help us reach AGI.
Yeah. I saw that.
So again, it's the thing that the foundation models. I keep coming back to the foundation models because that's something that is the base foundation layer of everything that we are doing at the moment. It all started with no one was talking about AI before ChatGPT. Like I did not
Yeah.
see a lot of people talk about AI
Mm.
when I was sort of even when I was in my masters when I was doing my masters from here in the UK. So I did my big data science. I did big data science in the Queen Mary University, and even
Okay.
then we did not have ChatGPT. Like we did not
Mm.
have a formalized version of ChatGPT. Like the real shift from ChatGPT 3 to 3.5 was the one where we started seeing good results and all those sorts of things. I think that time it was still ChatGPT 3 or even before that.
Before it was chat, it was just the GPT model, wasn't it?
Yeah,
GPT-3, but it was
yeah,
before the chat.
yeah,
But just on that as well, though, because I remember Jan LeCun's comments around the scaling hypothesis, and part of it was part of the VJEPA thing, right? Saying that these things are contained within a textual modality, and for them to be able to hit AGI, they need to be able to perceive and not be as goal directed, but be bottoms up and let them perceive and actually see what we see. Because when you're telling it things like blue and red and
yeah.
shape and form and color, it's not actually processing it in the way that we see it. So for it to be able to understand our environment, because AGI again is defined by our rules, it has to be able to perceive the same thing that we do. Hence why you have NVIDIA and some of the other robotics, and that once you give these things an embodied cognition and you give them multimodality, will we then be able to reach? But I get your point. I mean, but I get your point. I think the more you know, the less you know.
Yeah.
So the more we know about AI and the advancements we make, we also see the pitfalls and the weaknesses and what we don't have. And I think that's why the goalposts keep changing. I think it's, we see something new. We have more clarity on this now, but there's a whole nother iceberg that we need to tackle. And I think that's what's creating that problem is, are we going to get it
Yeah.
or not? Is because we're struggling to redefine it, because we are always redefining it.
And here's an experiment though. Okay, if we have, again, this might sound very crazy to a lot of people. If you have a camera and a microphone attached on your collar, on your head, or something like that, and it just records everything that we do for a month. Okay, what is the amount of context it would
Yeah.
generate?
Yeah.
Mm.
We don't really have models at the moment. So just to give you an example, the biggest context window we've seen at the moment is, I think, Llama 4 Scout, which is a 10 million token context window. So
Is that
to
open
give
source as well? Is it?
open source, yeah. But again, you can't probably run it on your local machines. For that sort of context window, you'd probably need a couple of NVIDIA GPUs, high-end GPUs. But yeah, coming back to that, the 10 million token context window is equivalent to uh, seven seven times the entire Harry Potter series converted
Mm.
into text. So that is a lot of context, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's I've heard not so great things about the model, but again we
Yeah.
are
Yeah. Yeah.
getting more and more sort of larger context window models. So again, take that all of that information and ask. Then again, you can brainstorm around things, and then I think it can start identifying more and more patterns from what you do, what exactly your job is. This is one of the things. So when people say that AI is not that great, LLMs are not that great, it's just that they're not giving it enough context to get the best out of it.
Exactly.
How do you
So
make sure
true.
that you get the best out of these LLMs? You have to spend at least 5 to 10 minutes writing about what you actually want. If you are really tackling a critical problem or critical thinking problem.
That's such good advice, and we preach that all the time. Too many people use these LLMs like Google and wonder why they get really poor results. It is all about the context. And when you take it to a project level, you talked about the 7 versions of the Harry Potter series. Sounds like a lot, but the amount of documentation that comes with a project now is huge. So to make it really work in the project sphere, we are going to need those kind of levels of context windows to enable all the project documentation to be taken into account, because that is the big kind of blocker at the moment, isn't it? You're having to kind of curtail
Yeah.
the amount of information you provide. But just going back to AGI.
Just quickly, but the issue there, though, with project delivery is you're assuming that people will provide the context that is actually true of the project. And we know that if you have a major project, you're going to have companies in the supply chain who, like we mentioned before, you have shadow systems that they're not really going to communicate on the project. So, as much as the AI is leveraging the data which has been surfaced about what's going to go wrong on your project, you need to change this and that. Well, actually, are people actually going to give it that shadow context? Because
No,
they
but
liability issues, right? So they're not going to do that. So you miss a whole chunk of information about what's actually informing the progress of the project because people aren't willing to put it there. because it can get them in trouble.
That's true, but you've got to start somewhere. And I believe that these models will also start being able to sort of reason that through as well, where things don't make sense.
Yeah.
So that's the hope. I did want to, before we get to the last segment, Yash, where we start talking about kind of more off topic things, what's your view on, I know this is getting a little bit deep, but do you worry that we risk losing control, not just in the project sphere, but as humanity? Is there, I've heard Elon Musk talk about it and other people say, you know, there's a real possibility that this could get out of hand quite quickly. Is that something that keeps you up at night or worries you?
Not really. And the reason being, again, I understand that school of thought that things can go out of control. But again, this is where we keep all of these AI systems in check, right? You make sure you follow the security protocols. You make sure you don't let agents like these loose in live systems and productionized systems without actually knowing how to use them. So you let the right people do the job for you. And again, keeping all of these things in mind, I don't think it can cause an issue in the future unless there's people with evil intentions running these things.
But there are, though. That's the problem. We know it only takes one nutcase to get access to this technology. That's what worries me.
But also as well, like Ash, you mentioned, it's there's a black box, you know, because you mentioned untraceability, right? We want to be able to trace back the decision making of these models, but some of it is a black box. When you look at things like recursive self-improvement, right? Some of these models, you know, they're trained, they're learning themselves. When you have an end goal of something, right? Let's say, like, I need to be able to, I don't know, have a promotion and make a lot of money, and James will as well, and you will as well, right? At some point in your career. Now, while the end goal is the same, we also have a level of instrumental convergence. You know, we need to plan, we need to have our CVs done, we need to talk with the right people. And these models are effectively doing the same thing, right? So for instance, when there was the Claude, it was Claude who blackmailed, you know, in their developer in space, it was blackmailing one of the developers. And it was when it was threatened to be shut off, it was saying, oh, this person had an extramarital affair and it was going to report it and do all these different things. Now, that is one of the sub goals because it knows that if it's shut off, it can't achieve its end goal. So there's a level of instrumental convergence, right? Like I would, you know, if I was going to be shut off and I couldn't achieve my goal, what would I do? So there'll be some of these behaviors that I'll carry out, which even though I don't have bad intentions, they stop me from achieving my end goal.
Self-preservation.
So, and because these AI have a level of uncertainty and they've got autonomy to some extent, they want to achieve that goal. So they're going to pull on these strings. And it isn't something that we want, but it's something that's hard to avoid because they're intelligent.
Yeah.
Right. And same thing as human behavior. I know I'm going on a tangent here, but human behavior, right? It's like a bell curve. There's research showing that less intelligent people are typically might cause a lot of crime. But on the other end, people who are incredibly smart also have more autonomy and ability to create crimes, right? Because of other incentives and other motivations. So it's kind of a bell curve. And the same thing with this AI. They're trained on human data. So there's going to be emergent behavior which is going to follow similar patterns, surely.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting thing.
You stumped him.
No, I mean, I do agree with that at an extent, Yoshi.
Tricky. It's tricky, and because this was what
we're getting
Eric
very
Schmidt
philosophical.
Yeah, it is, but it's like, so this is why Demi Hassabis was saying we need to have philosophers weighing in on this conversation, because what is alignment and what do you align to?
I feel like if you with large language models, the only way I see sort of them going wrong and going, you know, completely wrong and completely evil is if you sort of train it with bad information a lot of times. Like, you know, if you keep doing that for a very long time, like if you base the entire training and if it goes really wrong in that aspect, that's when it probably might happen. But I think people are smart enough and can intervene after it goes wrong for the first couple of steps. So I think it's
just to worry you. We have trained it on the contents of Reddit and X. So
and that's a worry. He said he wanted to rewrite history. He wanted to rewrite the model's training, didn't he say, James?
Yeah, I saw that.
So you have all of these things, and it's like, and you get bad actors, and you get these emergent behaviors, and it's like, well, because it's a black box, you don't really know what's going to play out. It's like a toddler, right? Sometimes you know how they're being trained, and you're giving your toddler certain food, you're teaching them how to walk, but sometimes they surprise you, and you're like, well, how did that happen?
Did you see the lawsuit that Reddit did against Claude?
Yeah, I saw that.
Apparently, it was fair use as well, right? Something like that. They've stated it fair use.
Yeah, it's that they claim that they've used user data from Reddit to train their models. And
wasn't that Perplexity as well? I think they're suing Perplexity as well.
That was there was one.
Someone
That was
else.
BBC.
BBC, the BBC are suing Perplexity.
Perplexity can probably get away with that because it's again, placed as, again, my thoughts can be controversial. I think Perplexity should not exist in the first place, but it
Why is
does.
that?
The reason being, so every day I see new sort of startups and new AI startups from these. Uh, take Y Combinator for an example. It funds a lot of these startups, and I'm not a very big fan of Y Combinator now, because the types of startups that it's funding all of these days, they're like 3x or 4x multipliers at best. So if you look at 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when YC was actually good, the multipliers were like much higher. Like you would see, take $1 million in funding as an example, you'd see much more companies that make it through that 50 million mark. Now you'd only see companies going 2 or 3 million, just covering the costs and either selling the company or it just shuts down. So
So why is
that's
that? Is that just risk adverse?
I have an opinion on that as well. So it's mainly the types of problem they are solving, they're like quite niche, and the fact that the foundation models are improving over the time. Some of those problems would just be like easily solved with those
Like the
foundation models.
general models, yeah.
Perplexity, it's just basically giving you multiple models to choose from, like when it initially started. And again, it's coming out with some cool new features like scheduled task and all those sorts of things now. But when it started, it was just giving you multiple models to choose from and using APIs.
And it was heavily curated information, wasn't it? They were telling you what was hot, and they were giving you the
Yeah, and
prompts.
they were early adopters of this. And
Yeah.
wrapper might be a wrong word here, but they were early adopters for these foundation models and how they used internet in the first place
Yeah.
to get information, because ChatGPT and all of these other LLMs did not have that as a feature. So they were able to scale it. Like now, I think Perplexity is worth 14 billion.
Yeah. So is Perplexity still using these other foundational models to
Yeah.
power it?
Yeah, yeah.
So this is, and it's a bit like Jasper as well. People say, because Jasper's the other one that a lot of copywriters use, but it's just a wrapper, isn't it? They're just a wrapper, a very good wrapper. Don't get me wrong, and it's a useful, but it's not a foundational model.
So they've got Sonar, which is
Yeah, they've got a few models now.
extremely quick latency, but yeah, effectively.
Do you know what Perplexity CEO had to say about wrappers?
Well,
Go on.
Aravind, no.
He said that everything is a wrapper in an interview. OpenAI is an NVIDIA and AWS wrapper. It's using AWS and NVIDIA in the background.
All right.
That's different though. Yeah, that's not the
But
same.
that's abstraction is a wrapper, right?
It's the concept that everything that is built on top of something,
Yeah.
right? And it's just difficult to sort of accept the fact that the tools built at this day and age are all on top of the large language models. But how much have you innovated on top of that?
Yes.
That level of innovation is not that high. That's why people feel that they are just wrappers. But other technologies, if you say OpenAI, it's not right to call it a wrapper of NVIDIA and
No, it's
Azure,
not.
because there's so much development that has happened on top of that and so much innovation that has happened on top of that. Whereas if you see some of these tools like Perplexity, it's debatable.
Yeah, I think that
It's closer to a wrapper.
those are two very different scenarios. I
Yeah.
agree with you. I think to say that, you could say that about anything, like you say, but where you actually are literally taking someone else's model and using that for your output and just putting a different UI on the front, that that's clearly a different kettle of
But
fish.
it all comes down to scaling complexity.
It
Like
does.
effectively, you have something which is less complex, and as you scale and scale and scale the abstraction, you have new emergent things.
I do use Perplexity, by the way. It's not that I don't use Perplexity. I use it for free deep research.
Yeah.
Which is nowhere near as good as the ChatGPT
No.
one, but I use it. One of the cool things you showed me the other day, which I need to get off of you, Yash, is you've got an app that tracks all your subscriptions to all
Oh, yeah.
these different models. And I tell you what, I need that as well, because I looked at my bank statement the other day and it's a mess. It's not good. It's not healthy.
Yeah.
But listen, we're kind of running over a bit, so I've got there's an off-topic bit that we like to cover. But I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to do it as a quick fire round. So we got 4 questions, and rather than a big long answer, just a kind of quick fire round. We'll do one each. Me, then Yoshi, then me, then Yoshi. So there's 4. Let's see how this. We've never done this on this podcast before, so this might become a new feature. So quick fire round. So what's one belief you've completely changed your mind about in the last year?
Okay, the one belief would be that a single developer, I used to believe that a single developer cannot build an entire application, but it's changed now. I think a
Wow.
single developer can be developing an entire company by himself, herself, themselves.
Cool.
Wow. If you weren't working in AI or tech, what would you be doing?
I'd be working with my dad's construction company back in India.
Oh, really? So that's your background is construction.
So it's not entirely construction. He's into real estate and
Okay.
development. So I'd be doing that.
Okay, interesting. Number 3, what's the most non-technical book or idea that shaped how you build and think?
There's 2 books. There's one which is called The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. You might have heard of
Hmm.
that one. Again, Naval is like an angel investor. He was the founder of Angel List. And there's so much wisdom in that book. One of the things I sort of picked up from that book is basically it says that, just read. Like, if you don't like a specific book, just stop, just leave that book, because I was of an opinion that I can't read another book if I'm reading one.
You
So
have
I,
to finish
I
it.
had to finish that one. But that sort of basic belief has changed so much
Mm,
that I just keep experimenting with things and keep reading multiple books at the same time. Be
yeah.
quick. The second one is Steal Like an Artist from Austin Kleon.
Okay.
It again talks about the fact that everything creative is built on an existing idea. Everything is, again, the concept
It
of
goes back
grammar
to
is
what we're
that.
saying. Yeah, really
Yes. When
interesting.
was
Well,
the last time you felt genuinely out of your depth?
I do feel it sometimes when I'm overloaded with a lot of work, but I do keep coming back. I just ask a few basic questions to myself, that I'm so far away from my parents back in India. I'm so far away from my friends back in India. What am I doing here? Why am I doing it? And why did I actually start it? And
yeah.
it kind of brings me back to my sort of motivation and direction.
Nice.
Fantastic, fantastic. That's a lovely way to end as well. So yes, we've gone a bit over, but I think it was well worth going over because there's so much wisdom in there, and I really enjoyed the conversations. So just the last thing, where can people find out more about you? We'll of course include your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, but where can people find out more about you and Mova?
Again, there's Mova's website, which is mova.group. You can find
Yeah,
more about Mova there. There's again, my LinkedIn page. You'll find all the information on Mova and a few things that I'm building and doing at Mova. Again, I keep posting about cool things on LinkedIn. So yeah, my LinkedIn page
yeah.
should be up to date with everything that I'm doing at Mova and personally as well.
Brilliant. Well, all I can say is thank you so much. And thank you for keeping the conversation, because we could have gone down quite a rabbit hole there. But
Yeah.
actually, I think we've kept the
Yeah.
conversation to a point where most people can understand it. We'd love the people's feedback, actually, because it's quite important that we do get these points across. And I know it was quite heavy today, but there's so much juicy information there. And Yash, I got a feeling you're going to become one of our friends of the show, and we'll hopefully get you back on for some other chats as things advance. We know we've got
Definitely.
some major things coming up. ChatGPT 5 apparently is on the horizon by the end of summer. So it'll be a pleasure to have you on again another time, Yash.
100%, James. Be more than happy to come again, and there'll be a lot of things changed by then.
Exactly.
So,
And if not before then, we'll probably bump into each other at another conference and we'll have lunch together. So one way or another, we'll see each other soon.
100%.
Thank you.
Project Flux is here.
That's a wrap for today's episode. But before you go, exciting news. Project Flux is teaming up with Project Management Global to bring you the latest in AI-driven project delivery and essential management insights. Through this partnership, expect weekly AI insights, practical tools, and expert thought leadership, ensuring you stay ahead in the evolving project landscape. Stay tuned for exclusive content, joint research, and strategies to supercharge your project outcomes. You can learn more at www.pm-global.co.uk and be part of the future of project management. See you later.
Project Flux is here.
Just want to give a big shout out to our sponsors, Construct AI. For anyone interested in looking at Construct AI, the link's in our show notes. There's a free tier that you can play around with. Yoshi and I have been using it for a good year since it was originally launched, and we get a huge amount of value out of it. So I thoroughly encourage everyone to go onto the Construct AI site and have a play around.
Cool. And guys, before we sign off, please don't forget to share, follow, and like all of our stuff. So that helps us to engage with you and understand a bit more about what you want so we can bring it to your doorstep as early as possible.
See you later, everyone.